building a connected learning community. I'd like to commence the meeting by asking everyone to take a moment of silence in order to honor a staff member that passed away this week. Holly Begini passed away on Monday. Holly joined D15 in 1998 and taught at Winston Campus Elementary as well as Frank C. Whiteley. She also served as the assistant principal at Lake Louise before taking a leave of absence recently. Holly was a passionate educator, collaborative teaching partner, and a truly wonderful person with many friends and many children that she led throughout the district. She will be missed incredibly by her D15 family. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. We've got Willow Bend here today. He's perfectly kind of crying too.
Good evening, I'm Bob Harrison, the principal at Willow Bend. I'd like to thank the board and Dr. Hines for letting us come to do the pledge. I would now like to introduce Teresa Drogos, a first grade teacher, and Katie Caldera, a fourth grade teacher, who are our green team leaders.
Thank you. These students make up our group called the Respectables, which help to promote Expect Respect within the Willow Bend community. So I'm going to introduce a few of these members here. Two are still out on winter break. So we have Bobby, who's a first grader, Ritika,
and we have Juliet and Lacia.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for coming today and leading us in the pledge. Dr. Hines would love to pass out some light up pens to you. It's the best thing we have to give. Aside from a great education. Yeah. Dr. Hines, I'm assuming you are going to take the staff recognition?
Yes, tonight it is our honor to recognize 4 staff members that recently received National Board Certification. And Erin Stein from our HR department is going to talk to the board and the community about what being nationally board certified means. So come on up, Erin.
Good evening. My name is Erin Stein, and I am the Assistant Director of Human Resources in our district. Thank you very much to President Shupai, Dr. Lori Hines, and the rest of the Board of Education for allowing me to speak about our stellar teachers who have joined an elite group of educators. National Board Certification is recognized as the gold standard for professional educators. The voluntary certification process is rigorous and intense, and teachers must demonstrate distinguished practice in content, knowledge, differentiation of instruction, use of data and assessments, and be reflective practitioners in search of continuous learning and growth. To begin, there are 3 teachers that we would like to honor this evening for renewing this certification, which is also a rigorous process. We would like to honor and call up Susan Esbrook from Gray M. Sanborn Elementary School, Lauren Lukowski from Gray M. Sanborn Elementary School, and Linda Maxwell from Kimball Hill Elementary School. Can we all give these teachers a round of applause? paper's sticking. Sorry. Additionally, we would like to take this time to honor and recognize 4 tremendous teachers who joined the ranks of nationally board certified teachers with exemplary status. We are extremely proud of these teachers who have challenged themselves to be lifelong learners and in turn share what they have learned with our children here in D15. Please join me in recognizing and honoring Allison Hudson from Virginia Lake Elementary School, Susan Major from Virginia Lake Elementary School, Irene Solomon from Virginia Lake Elementary School, and Tamara Wilson from Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. Congratulations.
If y'all would like to come closer to take pictures, you're welcome to.
Yeah, we could move away from this. And maybe move under the recognition board. That would be wonderful.
All the way over?
Sure, why not?
All the way over?
You want to avoid the podium.
Yes.
though, so you're one side of the. Actually, I'm going to give you that. So I'm going to do this go in between the podium and this little.
Go ahead and move the podium.
The wedding party.
That would have been a slam dunk.
Good thinking, though, Lisa.
Next time, Mike.
Next time we'll just sit here too and watch.
Right, yeah. What are you doing just sitting there? You're in the workhorse seat.
I know, right?
Congratulations. All right, we will now open our meeting for public comment. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Dr. Hines will get back to you shortly. Please state your name and identify any group that you represent, as well as limiting your comments to 5 minutes or less. If someone has previously articulated something with which you agree, please state that you agree, and rather than reiterating the entire comment. And finally, avoid any commentary specific to any person, student, or staff member, respecting that person's right to privacy. This is not the forum to comment on personnel issues. Anybody, Joe? God, it's crazy. It's like 3 meetings in a row with nobody. Would anybody like to talk? Dr. Edgar?
Batman?
Batman? Come on
Oh,
up.
wait.
I just have a quick thing. My name is Joyce Slavic. I have a D15 student in 8th grade in a high school, and I just wanted to say I attended a D211 vaping seminar for parents, and I think, unfortunately, that would be useful in D15 as well. Kids are doing it frighteningly young, so just wanted to suggest that.
Yep, thanks, Joyce.
Thanks, Joyce.
Appreciate it. I agree with your comment, 100%. I think it's interesting. I'm obviously a parent of a high schooler who's just graduated and a new high schooler, and in the last 4 years from when Zach started at Friend until he finished, I could not believe the open my eyes on vaping and the issue that it is. It's incredible, and it's very impactful. Mm-hmm. Right. By the time they're hitting high school, it's already full blown and agree. I'm not reiterating your comment, I'm just agreeing. Anybody else? All right, Superintendent Report. Dr. Hines?
Yes. Thank you. I will hit some highlights of how we spent the last month. As we work to fully define and implement a multi-tiered System of Support, our MTSS group. We've had a number of meetings that have taken place in the month of December, and it is our goal for the next school year to have both tiers, all tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3, fully defined with exit and entrance criteria, a common set of resources, and the team has been very hard at work. So I think that that's going to be an outstanding project that will benefit children on every end of the learning continuum once it's completed. We continue to work feverishly with our architects regarding facilities, and some of which information you will be afforded tonight, with STR giving you the latest capacity findings in terms of can our schools house full-day kindergarten if we wanted to go that route, what are their capacity needs, and just a continuation of past meetings. It is our intent every month to just continue to build on information that's shared until we're at a point where we'll need to start making some decisions about the future of our facility needs. Bid awards for the summer projects are out, and we welcome Tony Rossi, who is a retired director of facilities and is now working with us as a consultant to help us with some of our facility needs, as Craig Phillips has been taking some time off. So we welcome Tony to the D15 family. He's already making a dent in the list that we've given him. Strategic planning update continues to guide our work from a leadership perspective. The SIP leadership team, which is comprised of administrators and staff members from a variety of buildings, met to talk about how to bring the concepts from the refreshed strategic plan down into the building level. So that was a very powerful meeting, and we just continue to work to make sure that those boots on the ground, the teachers and PAs and clinicians and related service staff know what it is we're working on and feel as though they have the right support and information needed to operationalize the plan. Human resources, we really are diving deeply. We spent the better part of today talking about staffing needs at each of the buildings. And, it is our intention to come to the board with a really well thought out rationale in terms of where we're going to need to hopefully get your approval to increase some of our staffing allocations to really support some of our programs and the changing needs of our students. So that we'll continue to work on refining that over the next few months, but within the next few months we'll bring that proposal to the Board of Ed. Partnerships, we've had another successful meeting with our ESPA group. We do periodic union check-ins. I think it's always a good sign when we have meetings scheduled with other union groups and I think, everything's going so well, we don't need to meet. So we've had a few of those meeting cancellations, which is, as much as we'd like to meet, we're glad that there's nothing pressing that we need to talk about. I just wanted to thank publicly DTU, it's our bus driver union. They donated $1,000 to support the 1-5 Foundation, so thank you very much. I did write them a thank you note, but I wanted to just publicly thank them. They went into their union kind of coffers and donated $1,000 to help us bring flexible seating to our LRCs. We do have, as I think I reported in the past, a kind of a 3 to 5 year plan to hopefully modernize and bring flexible learning spaces to each of our LRCs. On Monday, a number of our schools went through Institute Day. Some will go on the 6th, some will go on the 21st. It was a very powerful day with Dr. Shiraki Holly, whom the board has met, and we had another round of CLR training. It was very well done and well received by the staff. So thanks to Dr. Schnorr and her department for all their hard work. It is no easy feat when you have as many employees as we do that you're putting through Institute Day to put a program together. So thanks everybody to everybody that was involved. And we had 2 D15 standout staff members that wanted to recognize. Valerie Reed. Is anyone here? Valerie or Brooke? No? And then Yuko Nakagawa was also another standout employee that was recently recognized in the district. All right, that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Discussion regarding Park Place due diligence.
Mike, come on.
I was thinking it was you, Mike, but I wasn't sure. Just gonna stare at him long enough.
Good evening, Happy New Year.
Good evening, Happy New Year to you too.
So in your board pack is a little summary on the Park Place. As the board is aware, the board entered into a purchase agreement June 25 to purchase Park Place for a potential 21st school location. And then on the board meeting on October 9, the due diligence period was extended to January 15. So the key date is January 15, so the board needs to decide, well, actually, there's two options. Does the board want to either terminate the agreement, or if the board is interested in continuing the pursuance of Park Place for a 21st school, then we need to ask the owner of the property to extend the due diligence period for at least another 90 days, probably 120 to 150 days. Because we would still need to enter in a purchase agreement with the developer of the property. And when we say due diligence, do our environmental investigations, see and actually draw up some preliminary plans for what the school building would look like, and then ultimately finalize the purchase agreement. So really, the two choices for the board tonight, either terminate the agreement or ask for an extension of the due diligence. Realizing, however, that the board may ask for a due diligence extension, but the owner still has the right, I guess, for lack of a better term, to say no to that. So even though the board may say, yes, we want to continue and pursue it, the owner of the property may say no. And we won't know that until we reach out to him.
We're just seeking board direction. What do you think?
Would anybody like to start?
I guess, has the owner of the property reached out to us to ask us what we are thinking yet at this point, with a week before the due diligence period ends?
Yes, he has. He has reached out. He, I think he usually watches these meetings live stream. I wouldn't want to venture a guess to know which way he's leaning one way or the other. I know he's very interested to know what the results of tonight's meeting are, but I have not. I personally have not spoken to him in about 3 or 4 months.
Right, we were on a call with Reed, Savas, you and I, probably a few months ago, and we're at a point administratively, as we work with STR. We're not still certain, and as we've said to the board, we're not yet certain whether or not we need a 21st school.
Yeah.
We're not sold that we do or don't.
And I think if you go to all the work that was done by the Boundary Task Force, with all of the options that were put up in front of us, there was no option that the addition of Park Place solved all of the problems at hand, which was our impression at the beginning. And it's my opinion, as you look across those options, there were other manners of increasing capacity sufficiently to get full-day kindergarten and doing some other things that we need to do in order to rectify some of the issues that we have that did not need Park Place to do so, and Park Place just added a nominal benefit, but nothing, from my perspective, for the value, for the cost of Park Place, and knowing that we've got other options on the table, I would be more comfortable putting that money towards something that was more holistic and benefits the whole community.
I would agree with you, Lisa, just in that regard. I think going through the options that were laid out, and I look for the dollars that are being spent versus the return and what we're looking to get out of that as a district. I don't know that it's worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, that said, I do think that having a school in the northeast quadrant is something that is a goal and is something that we should certainly aspire to. And I would love to have a neighborhood school there with the fields and all the other things we talked about through this whole process. But if it doesn't impact across the board and doesn't fix what we have that's broken, then it's not a good spend of taxpayer money.
Excuse me, I would have to tend to lean and agree towards that. However, my position would be, is there a cost benefit to us asking to extend the deadline? Is there actually, I guess maybe not a cost benefit, but is there a cost for us to extend the due diligence period to have that as the backup? Assuming again that the owner of the property would allow us to extend the due diligence period, do we incur, other than the continual research into whether or not that works, is there any actual cost associated with extending the due diligence period?
Well, the cost, so I think what the owner would want to know, if the board decides to ask to extend the due diligence period, that the board then spends the money in the due diligence and moves forward. I think if the decision tonight would be to extend the due diligence period for 90 days, 120 days, whatever, but then not do anything for the 90 or 120 days, I don't think that's the answer that the developer is looking for. I think he wants a definitive answer. Is the District 15 going to move forward or not?
Yeah,
So if we ask to extend the due diligence period, then the answer to your question would be yes, we would then have to expend dollars to do the due diligence, get potential drawings of what a potential school would look like,
Sure.
do the environmental surveys, et cetera. So there would be costs involved.
Yeah, and I guess without having firm knowledge of whether we're not going to go that way, I think I would be hesitant to expand costs without knowing that we are going to at least look at that as a 95% that we're going to move forward with that if that's there. I guess that's my position, is if we knew that we were going to move that way, to do it, but if we don't know that we're going to go that way, I would not like to expend the cost, and if he's willing to extend the due diligence period without us spending the cost on it, I'd say there's no harm, no foul. But if we have to expend the cost, then at this point, I don't think we're ready to make that decision. I know I'm not ready to make that decision yet at this point.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is simply that when we go through this process of, we've been going with our architects and whatnot, I know what the boundary task force had presented us, and certainly did look like it was a minimal benefit. My only fear is that if we come up with options through our process, and those options are, making us make tough choices about one benefit, particularly the benefit of full-day kindergarten, if foregoing this opportunity, if we're here maybe 6 months from now, it's like, well, if we had more space, then maybe we would have full-day kindergarten. That's my only fear, if something like that happens. But if the developer is looking for that, we're just not at that point right now.
What is the potential, and I guess Dr. Hines, since you've been here, how many additional sites have we identified that could be possibilities without getting into an actual detailed layout and plan? Are there other potential sites up in the northeast quadrant where we could find, if we were to lose this? Because say we, terminate the due diligence period and it's still available 6 months from now, like Zubair was saying, would he be willing to enter into a contract with us again if we determine at that point that it's ready? But in 6 months from now, if we've lost this piece of property, do we have other potential pieces of property that we could go forward on?
I was approached by one other group. There is another property that is available on the other side of 53. But again, we've kind of been in a holding pattern with
Right.
that. We've had a meeting to listen to the pitch, but until we're certain that we would need that 21st school, as part of the overall, true fix to some of our boundary and capacity issues, we've kind of held that group off as well because we're just not in a place where we know for sure.
Okay.
Is the location of that property more desirable than Park Place?
I would say probably equally as desirable.
I think from a transportation perspective, it's on the different side, the opposite side of 53. So I think there is benefit to that, as many of our families, the homes are on, and I'm so bad with directions, Mike, is it the east?
East.
I'm
Yes,
so
the
proud of
east.
myself. On the east side of 53, I mean, that's a benefit, and it is a standalone. It's not within a strip mall. So, those are things that are like potential pluses. But we haven't gone deeply, again, into anything beyond listening to a presentation until we know whether or not we want that to consider a 21st school. When we had our facility meeting with members of the Boundary Task Force recently, STR was present, Frank and Lisa served as board reps. We did talk about the possibility of that, taking a look at that program or having that group come to the board meeting. We decided not to bring it forth and have them come in until we were really certain that we needed a 21st school. And then if so, we would really want to do kind of what you're asking, maybe do a side-by-side comparison for the board, have 2 presentations done, and then really engage in a conversation. If we're going the route of a 21st school, which one would we prefer? Which one do we think would be best for staff, for students, and for the larger community? But we've just put the brakes on that until we're a little bit further along within our process. Anything else, Mike? So we just need direction from you, because it is January 8th. We won't meet again until February 12th. what would you like us to do in terms of our due diligence? Would you like us to ask Savas if he would be willing to extend? And then, as Mike said, determine a list of steps we would really need to take care of and the associated costs? Or are you willing to, would you like us to tell Mr. Savas that we, at this time, can't make a decision and we're not going to extend, but we're going to terminate?
I guess my position on it would be if he is looking for us to expand funds on it at this point in time, I would vote to terminate it. If he's willing to extend it for a period of time with us doing our due diligence on our end to make a determination on whether or not we need the school and we don't have to expend funds, I would be comfortable with that at this point. But I don't feel it's prudent to spend funds on something that we're not sure with yet. So I guess it would be, my position would be, let's extend if he's willing to extend. If it's his decision to terminate, then he can terminate at that time. That would be my position.
We're going to have to vote on this during action items, so if anybody has more discussion or you'd like to say something, Sam?
I have a timeline question. Are we going to be in a position 90 days from now, even if we do get an extension, to be closer to a decision on having the need for a 21st school, or will we be in a similar place we are now?
I think we'll be in a place of knowing whether or not we need a 21st school, what our capacity issues are going to be. What that's also going to then drive is a conversation about funding.
Mm-hmm.
How are we funding not only that 21st school, but any other facility issues that we're going to tackle, health, life, safety, if it's construction because we're going to need additions. Those decisions are going to come, pretty quickly on the heels of each other. So that's what we're really gunning towards, and all the work that we're doing is to bring clarity to the board. So we would hope within the next 3 months or so that we will be able to do that. Each meeting, again, we just keep trying to bring another layer of information to you. That's our goal. Would you agree, Jennifer? She's in the audience. Mike? Yeah, okay.
All right, anything further?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, STR. Thanks, Mike.
Speaking of
Yeah. Good evening.
I'll just be short.
It's all right.
Okay, let's see if I can make this work. I'm gonna change the order a little bit. This scenario 5 is where we last spoke, I believe, here at the board meeting. This was a result of some administrative collaboration and, can you hear me? Is it working? No? Yes?
It's a little quiet.
A little quiet.
You do sound quiet.
Okay.
Low and quiet.
Low and quiet.
You're like
it must be the height.
Ah, you're better now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, so scenario 5 is where we last left off with the collaborative effort we had with the administration and STR, and taking a look at capacity versus enrollment and how we could shift things around and still get full-day kindergarten. Since that time, we got together with Frank and Lisa and Dr. Hines and Mike and several others, as well as the BTF committee, in order to kind of regroup and meet and talk about what the goals originally were. And it was clear that assessing the school boundaries was definitely a priority. So as a result of that meeting and kind of setting forth our objectives for this meeting was twofold. To prepare a scenario that is using the Boundary Task Force Concept 2 feeder pattern as compared to our capacity study for each facility. And second, to determine a kind of a maximized capacity for each existing facility by confirming classroom or teaching station quantities at the locations, as well as identifying space within the existing facility footprint that could be renovated into instructional space. So I will start with the first objective. So after meeting with the BTF and with Lisa and Frank, we were given their rather impressive Excel spreadsheet that they put together as they were putting together their different concepts to prepare for the board. And it gave us some more insight about how they were not only created the feeder patterns, but how they were attempting to move programs, mainly gifted program, from school to school and where that happened. So we took that information and we put it into the same format that we had used previously so that we had the same language moving forward. This is taking a look at using the Boundary Task Force enrollment for each school because we really weren't able to figure out if we changed their enrollment numbers to match our enrollment numbers or the cohort survival numbers, what it would do to the rest of the information on that Excel spreadsheet. So we realized it was kind of close enough that it wasn't really going to make drastic differences between what they had for their enrollment numbers and ours. So for the purposes of this evaluation, we just used their numbers. This is showing the full-day kindergarten through 6th grade, and keeping the junior highs as junior highs. I don't think I had anything else to say about that. And then in scenario 6B, we took a look at what happens to those same facilities using the same kind of enrollment numbers, but shifting to full-day kindergarten through 5th grade, and then converting middle schools. Both of these scenarios, 6A and 6B, also assume the conversion of Thomas Jefferson to a junior high or a middle school. So after we had that information, we separately started to look at the capacity for the existing facilities. And to do that, we reached out to the principals who were able to very quickly turn around the information that we requested. We wanted them to confirm how many spaces were being used as classrooms, if some of their uses were in a room that were too large for that use or too small for that use, or if they could identify some spaces that they felt could be repurposed for instruction. And their input was very helpful, and so we started to put together another chart, which hopefully you can see. Did you get this printed out?
And I believe you have a packet at your seat where you can follow along.
Okay, so the purpose of this chart was really to evaluate the impact of potential renovations on the number of available classrooms within each facility. The potential renovations are schematic, so it's kind of our best guess at this time, we think. But the number of available classrooms might vary depending on how the renovations could be addressed, if at all. And so this first column, obviously, is the schools. The second column is identifying some of those spaces that could be converted. So it's showing, if there might be 2 full-size classrooms that are used as resource rooms now, and those resource spaces could happen in a half-size classroom space, we would say that we're combining those 2 resource uses into 1 full-size classroom and then regaining 1 full-size classroom. So that's kind of the language that's being used in this first column, showing possible renovations that could increase the classroom availability. In this program objectives column, I've only counted in the capacity objectives column, the capacity objectives column, general ed classrooms. So in the next column is all the special programs. So these are full-size classrooms that are dedicated to a special program of some sort. Gifted, ECDEC, AIM, SEAL, LEAP, MILE, all of those special programs are in that column. And I wanted to keep those separate so that we could identify at which facilities we have those program objectives to give us an idea of how and if we need to shift those from one facility to another. You would understand how many classrooms in each facility were dedicated to those. There may be in the future something for additional objectives. We haven't really identified that at some point, but I wanted to leave it in there as a placeholder. So then as we get to the available columns, there's 3 columns under available classrooms. I'm just transferring over the existing general ed classrooms at each facility. And then I've added any classrooms that we were able to capture through renovations in this column to the existing, so that in this bold column, we have the number of available classrooms, should all renovations be performed. And then we list also the number of special program classrooms as well, so that's separate.
Can I ask a clarifying question,
Yes.
Twin? So if you look at the line that is Central Road,
Mhm.
when you get into program objectives, it gives a number 2 gifted and 1 ECTEC.
Yes.
And yet as I move over to available classrooms, maybe I'm not understanding how you're doing it, but I thought then it would be 20 as the current classrooms.
Yes.
Then capacity objectives would be the addition of those other classrooms, so should that be 23?
It's the addition
Instead
of
of
this
22?
column, of the first column. So it's the addition of capacity objectives.
Two sped
I gotcha,
ed
okay.
resources.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I still want to try to keep separate these special ed programs.
I see. And so
So
the
they're
the
listed
next
as-
column with the
next column
3
is
is what
those
I'm
3.
referring to now.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
That way we can see at a glance which facilities have those dedicated classrooms. So if they have to move around, we know how many we're talking about.
All right, excellent, thanks.
Sure. So, any other questions on this stuff so far? Okay. So the last 3 columns under required classrooms are where we have taken the enrollment information from the Boundary Task Force that were used to generate scenarios 6A and 6B. And just for the sake of clarity and ease of this chart, in the elementary schools, we've just taken that enrollment and divided by 24 students per classroom to try to identify how many classrooms are required at each of those facilities based on the enrollment projected by the Boundary Task Force.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? So that
Good
is
try.
the total enrollment divided by 24?
Yes.
Okay.
So I know your targets are different, but, you know,
Yeah, just
and
keeping
my
it
knowledge
easy.
of Excel is
Yeah.
only so much. So that is true for both of these columns. So for the full day kindergarten through 6th grade, we did that calculation. In full day kindergarten through 5th grade, we did the same calculation. And I've used the same color coding as that circle chart that you've seen before. So the red means those classrooms, the required number of classrooms is significantly more than 1, more than that's available currently or with any renovations, and so on. And then the last column just compares it again to the scenario 5 that we had presented the last time we met.
And scenario 5 is not
It
aligning
does not have the
feeder
BTF
pattern.
feeder pattern, correct.
Okay.
Just, it's just kind of there for information.
Yeah, so all these numbers, when you're talking about like how many classrooms you need at each school, is taking the boundaries as they currently exist.
No, this is using the BTF concept 2 feeder pattern and how we had put that in this,
But it's a
in
feeder
their scenarios.
pattern, but it's not necessarily
It's their
the
feeder pattern
boundaries
and
changing.
they changed the boundaries to get these enrollment numbers, the Boundary Task Force did. And they shifted, gifted around.
I don't think they did.
Yeah, I don't think boundaries.
All they
have
did was
changed.
they took off the overlay. They left the current boundaries exactly as they were, and they took students within those boundaries, but they eliminated the EL.
Our
Overlay.
work was
I-
eliminating the overlay. They did not eliminate the bilingual overlay.
It was Andy's understanding that
Mhm.
they had changed the elementary boundaries to align with the middle school. They may not have changed the middle school boundaries, but I believe the elementary boundaries changed.
I think it was just feeder patterns that were changing, not
Yeah, I think they
boundaries.
just changed the feeder patterns,
Right,
not the,
yeah, not the
not the
boundaries.
boundaries. So my point being that, you could reappropriate.
So they didn't change the boundaries, but they shifted program.
Basically feeder patterns.
feeder
So they
patterns, yeah.
left the boundaries and the quantity of children within those boundaries exactly the same, but then put the numbers where it took, like, for example, at Paddock, instead of having children split between Sunling and
Right.
Plum Grove, they all went to Plum
Right.
Grove, I believe, or something of that sort. They aligned the feeder pattern.
Okay. But then they did also move gifted around. That we know for sure. That they've moved students
Yes.
that were
Right.
at gifted
Those
programs
pull
in.
from the whole district, so
right.
it's kind
It-
of
What it looked like
boundary-free.
from. Sorry.
The gifted program is pulling from all the schools, so really it's irrelevant to the boundaries. That's, I think, why
Right.
we're looking at doing that.
Right. Okay.
But what I'm saying
Okay,
is
so-
that you could reappropriate the number of kids from one school to another school if your boundaries were redrawn. So in other words, if the school is looking like it's at capacity and another school is below, you could actually, when you redraw the boundaries, you may fix that problem.
Correct.
So that's my point, that the schools that are shown as overcrowded are, potentially could be made not overcrowded if you change the boundaries.
Yes,
That's my point.
yes.
So in other words, when you're looking at this column, it says we need, like, for instance, at Whiteley, you need 29 classrooms. That's just based on the number of kids that are still in the current boundaries, not after boundaries are redrawn, because nobody's redrawn the boundaries.
Correct.
And then that drives what we were working on, and Renee, Urbanski was really diving into with Tom Bramley about the bilingual overlay. And if we were to peel that back in its entirety, or, a portion of it, again, knowing that we can't pull it all the way back because we don't have that school in the Northeast Quad, what would that do to our numbers? We kind of pivoted from that after our last meeting, and certainly the conversation that you two were part of, because we were directed to kind of use the boundary task force work and just take it these next couple steps forward. So, to Frank's point though, if we were to want to take a look at one of these scenarios more deeply, I think we need to work from this point, but then also engage with the boundary task force, not the boundary task force, Renee and Tom, to figure out what we're going to do with the overlay. Because there are a lot of kids at different schools that don't live in that area, and we've transported them
Right.
to these schools to help with capacity issues and to compensate for the fact that we don't have a school in the Northeast Quad. We would have to decide if we moved kids that don't officially live in that area out of each of these schools, what would that do to the numbers and the color coding? Would they still be overcrowded, crowded, efficient, underutilized?
So the two concept 2 and concept or FDK 5 and FDK 6, one that we just, these are not, so when you say we haven't done the bilingual overlay, you're saying that these numbers don't account for where some students have when they're not in their neighborhood school, they're being transported to another school, or that's already accounted for in these numbers?
The numbers that are here reflect where the children go to school now with the bilingual overlay intact. The boundary task force did not get involved with Cheryl Wolfel or Tom Bramley about the boundary overlay.
Yeah.
And it has massive
Okay.
implications.
But
I thought Brian said that they
They did.
disregarded the overlay, and the kids were all from their home
I believe that's true.
schools.
Yeah.
That's what I thought he
I
said.
believe that's what this is showing.
Yeah.
I thought they did it based
So-
on addresses.
Yeah, based
That
on
was
addresses.
what the data feed was in the,
So the idea is
In the software
is this
that
map
they use.
or this chart
With OnPass?
would be a lot different if you accounted for that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're going with the concept that we're changing everything, whereas, people are no longer being transported outside of their home area for bilingual purposes, lack of a better word, then this chart would be significantly different once you incorporate that in there, correct? Like right now, it's showing, overcrowdedness in, a certain number of schools. Maybe that would be a little bit different, maybe it wouldn't change, I don't know exactly how it would affect it.
The overlay and gifted, and then they look at the forms. Can I ask another kind of a dumb clarification question? So, if I'm looking at the line that's Whiteley, and I look at current gen ed classrooms 21, 22 with the plus classroom from the capacity objective column. The 7 then is 2 gifted, 3 AIM, 2 SEAL.
Yeah.
So the actual capacity of that school then, if you were to eliminate special programming in the school, is 29 classrooms.
Correct.
So then the red that's in the first column becomes a yellow, or a blue, or a green.
If you have another facility to put those special programs.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's
Yep.
assuming that there
Yeah.
was.
And that's why I held that column out, so that we could
Okay.
make those.
All right, so then if it's right at the capacity number, Jennifer, what is the color that?
For this purpose, we did green. If it was the same number of required classrooms as available classrooms, we did
Okay,
green.
great. Thanks.
If it was
just-
one more, we, I think, did yellow, and then if it was more than one, because
Right.
that would be too much to really renovate within the facility, we did red.
Yes, okay.
Similarly, we did the same sort of, well, I think I got screwed up, but for the junior high schools. And we assumed that Thomas Jefferson was converted, and so the teaching stations shown for Thomas Jefferson wouldn't match what the existing classroom quantity is, because we've made some modifications to make it either a junior high or a middle school by combining classrooms to create either a STEM lab or science labs. But the same kind of exercise was done, and for the purposes of junior high, I think we assumed 28 students per classroom, or 27. 28 for junior high and 27 for middle school. But the difference with the junior high or the middle school concept is that it doesn't have to be just a classroom that is available, it just as a teaching station, so gymnasiums and art rooms and music rooms for the junior high count for a teaching station there, so you have a little bit, we put a utilization factor in the required number of classrooms to account for that, so that it kind of brought them closer together to what's available.
So in looking at the required, turn my mic on and turn it off. That's better. In looking at the required teaching stations under the full-day kindergarten through 6 junior high school concept, we are fine as far as teaching stations. We won't call them classrooms, but teaching stations go based on our numbers currently
For the junior high schools, yeah.
for the junior high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's still just 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
Assuming conversion of TJ.
Yeah,
Assuming
assuming that's where it's
Right.
all,
Right.
if you go to the
Yep.
next one, it's all blue
Right.
in that first column.
So then we shift any capacity issues we have are down
In the
at
elementary.
our elementary.
At the
level.
elementary.
Correct.
Whereas if we get into the
Because you
second
see more
column,
red.
yeah, where we're going to middle school, now we've got issues at our current junior highs, just a couple,
Yes,
and less
Two.
issues at our elementary, but we still have both.
correct.
The total number of schools issues goes down at the middle school level
Right.
by a little bit.
Yeah.
When with the second scenario, we have 5 schools in red, and with the third scenario, you have the 2 schools in red. If you were to go full day K-5, making our juniors middle, you have capacity issues at 2 of your schools. Plum Grove Junior High and Winston Junior High would be overcrowded.
Right.
So that's kind of how you track the construction impact from these 3 scenarios.
But the third scenario also does not align the feeder pattern.
Correct.
Right, so it has
Yep.
less issues, but
Yep.
it doesn't solve
Address
It
that
doesn't
basic
solve the
problem.
biggest issue.
Right.
Yeah, that's where we saw that last time,
Right.
I believe.
That's the one you saw us. Yeah.
So,
So-
the colors that I'm seeing in the spreadsheet, the junior highs, just looking at that quick, it isn't matching what's in that feeder pattern chart.
Yeah, there's a few anomalies that Andy and I are trying to work through. I think that some of it has to do with the number of students that we've assumed per classroom, because we've just kind of done it across the board. I think it also has to do with the fact that the enrollment numbers that are in the circle diagram include special ed students, because they're not separated out, and not in the cohort, they're not separated out either. So there's kind of a double dip there of some students between the special program classrooms and general ed classrooms. So I think there's a few things that weren't able to quite flesh out before, but it's it's kind of close. It's I don't think it's going to get. Some of those are not going to
I'm
get out
looking
of
at
red.
some of these numbers and they're like, it's over by 300. Another one's over by 300, another one's over by like 300. Capacity wise, that doesn't seem all that close.
Well, on the circle diagram, those numbers are straight from the BTF. So the number of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's showing,
They've,
Like Plum Grove,
Yeah.
Sunling, and Winston Campus all being overcrowded by about 300 students roughly.
That's going to middle school concept though as well.
Yeah,
If you look
that's,
at
I'm comparing that to that same column there in the spreadsheet then, where we got only 2 schools that are overcrowded. And I'm like, how'd that happen?
Because of feeder program, or sorry, the feeder patterns.
Yeah, same one, column 3.
Yeah.
Under the required teaching stations. So it must be just,
There's something goofy there.
however this is, I guess that's just the question that, what's right, what's wrong?
Well, I mean, I think also, if we're thinking about the priorities, let's take a step back, you know, we have, there was priority of full-day kindergarten, there's a priority of the feeder patterns aligning up. There was a preference for middle school, at least, I don't know if I'm just talking about myself, I don't know if the whole board said that or not, but I know those 3 things were there. And then the concept of having neighborhood schools was something that was there, that, hey, people are not being, you know, bused for long distances, as that being a desirable thing. So if we look at what's come out of this, you know, some of these, now that we've included this feeder pattern in here, you know, I think the BTF feeder pattern concept too, the one making the middle schools, I guess, is the one that I guess is of interest to me, looking at this. I mean, I know we still have some serious overcrowding in some of these schools, but it seems to me a step in the right direction, and then we kind of have to see what can be done from here. And then that's why the other part of it, where the neighborhoods concept, whether it's in here, meaning if this doesn't take into account people being shifted to, you know, if it's just going by the addresses, I think that's a good way to you know, just people's addresses, these numbers, these capacity numbers, are just going by the address. I think it's a good place to start, because the idea being is we looked at if you're being transported because of you know, language reasons all the way to another area, that's not ideal. That's not one of the, you know, so we should start with the concept, let's have everybody having schools around their addresses, which is what these 2 charts are showing. And it shows a problem of overcrowding in a few of these schools, and let's address how we can deal with that.
Well, and there's overcrowding in both scenarios.
Yeah, there's
So-
overcrowding in both scenarios anyway, so we're gonna have to deal with, you know, how can we, you know. take
Which,
care of
which really leads us to kind of one of the things that we've been talking about in a meeting that we're going to have now, I think it's January 22nd or 23rd, with the group that School District 308 used, RSP. They do deep boundary work, and it would be to come in and really take a look at our boundaries and determine if we really are going to, you know, redraw the boundaries. We shared that work at the meeting that both of you attended, and we've scheduled a meeting with them. We've sent them our work so far from August to now, the last 5 months, what we've been working on, and we're gonna have a meeting to see if they can help us, you know, parse through some of this to equalize balance the schools out, and potentially not have to do as much construction, but really change some boundary lines. I think when the Boundary Task Force works their good, better, best model, they were trying to do this and not really change
Yeah.
boundaries, because we know that's a real sticky subject, but we know that in order to do a thorough job, that has to be one of the scenarios that we run.
Yeah, I mean, I think what might be helpful to the board is to have both of those, like, okay, here's one option where we don't change the boundaries, and here's all the construction costs associated with that, because we need to add capacity to all these schools. Here's another option where we change the boundaries in such and such fashion with no construction costs, and maybe one that does both.
Right.
You know, kind of something in between. Those type of
I think no matter
choices
what,
might
we're gonna
be
have to
helpful.
change the boundaries.
Some
Because
of
there's some boundaries that just don't even make any sense, to just do the housing that's been built in different locations and things have just been.
Well, yeah, that's why I agree with you. I mean, I think that having
Regardless, something's needs to change.
yeah, I mean, I'm of that.
Nothing's
yeah.
gonna change the scenario, in my opinion.
That's why I think it's a good idea to have one option. Hey, here's some
Yeah.
changes here's some common sense boundary changes that should be made, and we won't have to worry about either building a lot of capacity or getting a new school or any of these type of things. Here's one scenario. Here's another scenario where we will make some changes and less boundary changes. Here's no boundary changes in a lot of construction. I think we need to put all those on the table so we can kind of compare those competing interests. But
I mean, I think there's a lot of moving parts here, and until somebody puts this into a software package, like was originally envisioned, you're not gonna be able to come up with an answer. It's impossible.
Yeah, we're getting way beyond our expertise.
Yeah, clearly this is
I'm
not your
excited to talk
forte.
to,
We need to have somebody who can crunch the numbers and run the software, which was originally envisioned, so.
is that what this group that you just
RSP?
mentioned? Is that
Yeah.
what they do?
They're school
They're
planners.
school planners, that's
Okay.
what they do.
And so they've, and if you get a chance to look at that presentation that they did, I forget which month, at School District 308, it pretty much aligns with all the boxes you're trying to check
So
here.
our intention will be to meet with them at the end of January, I believe it's the 23rd.
Yep.
More than likely invite them then to the February board meeting, so they can talk to you about the work they do, make sure we have clarity around what we would like them to do. There will be a cost, obviously, to bringing RSP on board, so that would be something that we would then discuss with you in February, and if you sign off that we can engage with them, because you think they'll help us get this into the end zone, then that's what we'll do. So that's kind of our next big step.
Yeah.
From your work, were you able to ascertain as whether or not we could bring full-day kindergarten to all of our elementary schools with the current space that we have, based on information the principals gave you?
No, I don't think so. There might be a couple of the schools here and there. Winston Campus Elementary might be one of those, but the majority of the schools do not have enough available classroom space to leave the sixth grade there and still.
Because I know that was one of the
because most
things
of the
we
time we're adding
wanted
2 classrooms.
to, from the meeting that we had, the smaller group meeting, that was one of the questions that we had.
Yeah.
Could that happen? And that was something that the Boundary Task Force said they believed could happen. We wanted to vet that,
Yeah.
and we
Yes.
have said it
Kinda.
cannot happen.
So, I'm sorry, we're
It's kinda
saying
hard
that
to
if
tell
we,
that from these numbers, actually.
if we kept the full
The
day,
numbers that the principals gave us, I think it was clear. They walked
They
the
gave us
building
a
and.
few additional classrooms.
for
right,
us
we're
to
saying
let
if we
that
kept,
allow
if we
us.
kept everything the same,
Right.
could we just implement full day kindergarten for the 2020?
Do we have
2020,
2, 3,
21
4,
school year.
sometimes 5 classrooms?
At some of your
Okay.
schools you can, some of them, it gets.
Okay.
kind of not-
Yeah, because
not
we were,
so
when the Boundary Task Force made their presentations, they said, yes, you could do it. And in our personal meetings with them, I think we all met them separately, they were doing that by assuming certain classroom, or certain spaces would be able to become classrooms. And that was a discussion that happened at the board level here, where we're like, what information do you have? Have you been able to get all the information from the administration? There was that kind of conversation, so it was kind of left out there, well, we need to confirm that. But then SDR has come in, and maybe you've been able to get the information from the principals directly, or we have more information. And if the answer to that question is no, which is what I suspected, because it just, I guess it just seems to me like, if it was here all along, I would just be really disappointed.
We don't have any
and,
extra
Yeah.
classrooms
I don't-
hanging
I
out
don't
there.
know.
We just,
situation, I don't
if
know.
15 schools
I
had
don't
2
think
or
we
3 or
can-
4 extra classrooms.
yeah, I was always under the impression that we
The
didn't
other
have enough.
difference is that the way the Boundary Task Force looked at things, they looked at individual classrooms and how to fill them. And in some cases, they allowed them to get overcrowded by 15% or more. And so our calculations were trying to keep within the target number of class sizes and also keep some scheduling flexibility, especially at the junior high level. So there's a little bit of different way that the Boundary Task Force went about it than we did. But there's clearly in several schools no extra classrooms hanging out there that can just absorb the kindergarten needs.
Yeah, it really depends on how you break this all down. I mean, I'm just looking at this, and there's 11 ECDEC classes, which theoretically we don't really need to have in the district.
Well, that's not true. We are in a grant with them until 2014, I believe, 2023 or 2024. So we are in a partnership. We have an agreement with ECDEC that, we can't.
It's binding?
Yes, I mean, Sue, correct? It's 2023 or 2024 with ECDEC, when that grant runs out.
That is the current grant, and we are listed as the location for all of the services and programs. I'm not familiar with the procedures to get out of the grant. It's right, so maybe we can look at it. ECDEC is the grantee, and we are the location for the services.
Yeah, I don't.
So we don't know whether or not that's.
Yeah, but I don't think we want to go down the route of dissolving the ec deck.
No.
No.
Well,
So we
Throw
just
that
want
to
to.
the
looking for space and you don't wanna build more schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Some
mean,
other classrooms.
And then there's also a possibility of renovating stuff at CLA too. I mean, if you are willing to move a program around, we think we can create like 9 classrooms at CLA in the areas that are just used as storage right now. So you could create some space there. Is 9 enough to get full day kindergarten everywhere? I don't know, but it's certainly enough to make a dent. So,
And I
so
think-
certainly the conversation about programs needs to happen. I think the boundary conversation may need to happen first and then figure out.
Well, we talked about that in my office yesterday, is,
Yeah.
you know, do we reconvene the Sue and Renee and Tom Bramley group and Meg to talk about programs? You know, it's a chicken or the egg. Do we do that, or do we wait to have RSP come in, meet with us, see what they can do for us in terms of school planning, and then determine
And I
programs?
think that possibly with their guidance, we could do it with them. And the recommendation include that in conversation as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
I
don't-
also think, I'm sorry. Fran.
No, no.
Um,
Go ahead.
Going to the work of Boundary Task Force, there were always some schools that would have to have some level of addition.
Right.
So,
Correct, yeah.
you know, it was not with existing buildings exactly as is.
Yeah.
It was utilization potentially of Park Place or additions
Yeah.
on a handful of schools and
That's a
making
good
some
point.
other adjustments. So it takes us back right to pretty much where we were. And if you look at the survey results from the community, based on what Zubair was saying, what the community had as the very top issues was realignment or straightening out of feeder patterns. It was community schools and full-day kindergarten, those 3. So the addition of going to middle school concept was an administrative request.
Correct.
And if you're going to make these adjustments, can we do something that makes our curricula work better because we've got middle school concept curricula? So that's not a request of the community, that's a request of D15 admin.
But we believe that by going middle school, it would free up
Right.
space at our elementary schools to bring full-day kindergarten. Not only do we believe philosophically, pedagogically, that a middle school concept is better than a junior high. Junior high is an old construct. And I think every administrator, in which there are 60, they're all nodding their heads, we're solid on that point. And we think that that's potentially the most inexpensive way to bring, to free up the space that we do not believe exists in our elementary schools to make full-day kindergarten happen.
So it's a
Right.
potential solution.
Exactly, and a way to
So not a
help get
community
full-day
desire,
kindergarten.
but a potential solution that
Mhm,
also
correct.
fits
Yes,
what you would like to see
as
from an
administrators,
educational standpoint.
as educators, right, yes. Correct, very well said, yes. So, RSP, we will meet with them in June.
Nope.
Or not June, January. No,
Taking
just
a
gonna
whole-
take it easy until the summer. And then would you like us to see if they're available for the February 12th board meeting?
I would absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if you would reach out to, is it Stacy?
Stacia and
Stacia?
Rob.
And see then, not only are they available on the 23rd, but if they can put time on their calendar to come to the board meeting on the 12th
Will do.
of February.
Okay. Thank you all.
Anything else you'd like us to be thinking about doing between this meeting and next meeting?
Could I get the background information on the,
Yes.
was it RSP?
Yeah.
I will, we will include that in my Friday memo.
I can ask them.
If
to.
they have like background, like
Bios,
resumes of who
right,
they
yeah,
are,
I'll
and
get
what their
bios.
expertise is.
And Jen, you were going to
district.
ask if they would give us a copy of
Yeah.
308's work, because when you try to download it on that website, you cannot.
Yeah.
So it's locked. You can see it, you can view it, but, can they send us that as well?
No.
Because then you'll get a sample of what a finished product would look like.
I don't know if it makes sense and is able to be done before next board meeting, but does it, when we look at the necessary construction costs, for these the two new concepts for this month, the ones per,
6A and 6B.
yeah, for those two, can we get an idea of how much that might cost to avoid the overcrowding that it's showing? You know, like we have here 300 more, Winston campus is over 300 capacity, or just like, how many more Like what would be, I mean, I don't think, yeah, it's probably too much to get done before next meeting, but that's the next step.
And it may be, for
I
not.
don't even
Maybe
think
they're
they
not
really,
because they're
I
all
don't
registered.
even think we even really know how many extra kids we need to put
Right.
at each one of the
Yeah.
And if we're
schools,
talking about
unfortunately.
changing boundaries, it may just be
I mean,
an exercise.
I guess in a way, I mean, just looking at the numbers from that little circle diagram, I mean, you're definitely gonna need, it looks like you're definitely gonna need a lot more capacity at Plum Grove, which has no space, and Sundling and Winston Campus. So, I mean,
Right.
I guess my question, I guess to put it, to put what you're talking about, can you even add on to these junior highs?
Yeah, some of them you can. I've looked at Plum Grove, I mean,
Plum Grove you
it's
can?
destructive, but there's a way.
It's destructive. Tear out the
You
walls
get-
we just replaced.
Just one.
Just one. Yeah, she did look at
One
that.
big one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you
But,
might
yeah.
you might run into this. You might run into a situation where you're ultimately looking at that you cannot accomplish these things without building a new school.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that 21st school, we're still
That's
chugging
why
along,
we're-
let's see
that's why
if
we're-
we
these are all
need it
moving
or not.
parts. But yeah, but I think it
So I
makes sense.
think-
To go back to your question, yeah, it makes sense that they would come here and give us information about that piece about okay, if we change some of the boundaries, how does that affect the overcrowding and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Nicholas is next, so I don't know if you want to stay, and if Mike wants to come up to talk about construction management piece.
I'll move away from them.
Real quick, I'd also like to thank Brian Lucas and Jen DeFranco for representing the Boundary Task Force in the meeting that we all had. They shed a tremendous amount of light on the work that was done and
Yep.
helped everybody to move forward a little bit quicker. Thanks, guys.
Ready?
Okay, we ready?
So there's an action item on the board agenda later for tonight to approve Nicholas and Associates as a construction manager and cost estimator. So what we're asking Nicholas and Associates to do is not unlike what Gil Bain did when the board issued its $27.25 million of life safety bonds in the summers of 2016 and 2017, and a little bit of that one in 2018. So Gil Bain acted as a construction manager. So under the construction manager plan, we go out to bid, we issue multiple contracts. Maybe there's a roofing contractor, asphalt, whatever, all the different trades. And then the construction manager manages those projects. The construction manager gets a fee to manage those projects. We entered into an agreement, and there's a fee schedule that we negotiated with Nicholas, so we know upfront what that fee is. Compare that to what we've done the last couple of years when we did when we did work at Frank C. Whiteley for the curtain wall, and also that was Gil Bain. Oh, I'm sorry, at Plum Grove. We did the curtain wall at Plum Grove. That was a general contractor, and the work that we did last year with Stuckey was a general contractor. So we issue one we go out to bid, same thing, we issue one contractor, and then the general contractor is responsible to manage all the different trades. Embedded in that amount that the board awards to the general contractor is a fee. We don't know what that fee is. So whether we do a construction manager or general contractor method, there's still a fee involved that the person gets to make a profit off the project. When there's a lot of when there's a lot of different trades involved and a lot of work, it's more efficient, and I'll let Jennifer add in too, to go the construction manager route, because there's more efficiencies on managing all the projects that have to go on. When we look at summer of 20,
Bless you.
bless you,
We're falling apart up here.
we have HVAC upgrades at Willow Run School, which is univents, and also maybe rooftop units. We're bidding that out as an alternate. There's the secure vestibules in 5 or 6 buildings, and also some of the other little additions. So there's about, I think we're doing 9 or 11 buildings that have secure vestibules. So there's a lot of work and a lot of projects to manage. So we think it'd be more efficient to go the construction manager route on that. And as we look at all of our outstanding life safety items of $110 million and how we start tackling that over the next 4 to 5 years, it would make sense to go the construction manager route on that as well. That's part one of the proposal, the cost estimator. As we just got done with the discussion, once we start getting the proposals in RSP, and if we start doing additions to elementaries or middle schools or 21st school, there's a lot of work involved in that. STR does the plans, does the specs for it, but really what we need is the second or third set of eyes to cost out to develop a cost is, as Mr. Khan had asked, what would it cost? What would it cost to put 4 classrooms on Plumville, or any of the buildings, or if we had to add classrooms out in elementary, what would that cost? And that's really what the expertise of a construction manager like Nicholas and Associates would add. There is no fee, so so what we would enter into a master agreement, same as we have with STR. There's a master agreement, and the fees are already predetermined. They've already been negotiated, and then depending on the size of the construction project, once the final construction costs are in, not the bid, the final construction costs, that's what the fee is based upon. And but then we have project authorization sheets. As the board's aware, every time the board authorizes a project with STR, I always bring those to the board for approval. There's 2 project authorization sheets, tonight's board agenda, one for the summer 2020 projects, which would be, again, Willow Bend, the secure vestibules. We're also looking at some fascia panels, just that would probably be included in that as well. I didn't put that in the write-up, but that would be part of it as well. And then a project authorization sheet also for cost estimating. There's no fee with the cost estimating at this point with Nicholas, in anticipation that if we go forward with the projects, that we would go on a construction manager basis, and they would be the CM on those projects as well.
Have you worked with Nicholas before, Mike?
You know, we worked with the district worked with Nicholas, and they function as a general contractor probably about 7 or 8 years ago. It was about a $2 million project. That project went very, very well when we did work with Nicholas. So we did as a GC, but not as a CM.
STR though has an extensive.
We have several projects with Nicholas, and we collaborate with them very well. And what we found that they have a great ability to get a lot of work done every summer. I'm amazed every summer what they have done for Schaumburg District 54.
And I have worked in districts in the past that have used Nicholas as well. They're a reputable company, they get the job done.
If midnight was the due date to get construction projects done last summer, we probably ran to about 11:58 or 11:59. We got there.
I think it was 12:05.
No, actually we got there. Well, 11:59 point in
Yeah,
55 seconds. We got there just right, just for the start of school. So I mean, we got right down to the line. But, so obviously with the CM and better management of the projects, we would expect that we would not be in that situation this upcoming summer.
But also then too, in light of, Fred Phillips, we also think that this will be another layer of support. As we need to be working now to prep for summer projects, that time is going to be here before we know it. They will also be able to help us continue to keep the projects that we know we need to get done this summer on the right track.
And then we have the authorities, so with the project managers that are assigned to the project and the fees, we would negotiate that on a per project basis. I mean, we'll be going out to bid at the end of January for summer 2020, and we'll going out to bid Friday, thank you, and then for Monday, and we'll have a base bid and 6 alternates. So when we come to the board in February, the board can decide if it wants to take the base bid and 0 or between 0 and 6 of the alternates, the way we set up the projects. And then based on, again, once we know what the final construction project is, the fee will be based on the master contract. That we've negotiated with Nicholas, and has also been reviewed by Hodges Louisi as well.
So construction manager is in lieu of a general contractor?
Correct, yes.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Student achievement, come on down.
This is the one that's on, right? This is, yeah.
Laura, you can grab that one on your side, yeah, 'cause
Okay.
that's the one you're
The
gonna
little
use
one?
today. I don't know if the little one is working or not.
This one's
Oh, they're
working.
working, all right. So, Dr. Hines, President Schupai, members of the board, thank you, Happy New Year. So, on a personal note, before we begin here, I think it's important that you know that despite a lot of diligent effort and some arm twisting, the Batman term has not stuck. So, except for Dr. Hines called me Batman today, other people
It's sticking with
have
me.
not, I know, I'm trying, I'm still trying. I was trying to get Dr. Swanlin here to go by Bonnie and I could go by Clyde, but
She said a hard pass.
it's not working, yeah, so it's not working.
Yeah, way to be tough, Laura.
Lisa,
Way to be
Nuss, and I
tough.
have an appointment afterwards, to talk about those problems, so. All right, so this year, this report is coming a little bit later than it historically has, but this is this year's achievement report. And it is something that is new in terms of what you're going to see in a couple of important ways. First, we have continued to try and align this report with ESSA, which is the state's view of how students are succeeding. And it is the system that the state uses to judge our level of success, our school's level of success with our students. And the attempt of ESSA is to go beyond achievement scores, beyond the test representing the child, to really looking at the whole child using multiple lenses: assessment results, student engagement, climate, etc. The other part is, of course, we have a refreshed strategic plan, which, as Dr. Hines mentioned in her update, is the guiding light that we use to frame our work, right? The idea of the strategic plan is to provide us with priorities that we must keep in sight while we attempt to do our work, and to make sure that those priorities are never forgotten as we work in the whirlwind of things that need to be done for our students to be successful. So we've aligned to ESSA, but also we've included new sections that we've not done before that are guided by our core value of a commitment to equity, right? And that commitment to equity calls on us to make sure that we are really closely monitoring, reporting, and continue to track the opportunity gaps that we find within our district as well, right? So we'll be talking about how we're doing academically, but also we'll be talking about how we are doing by group and the gaps that we have in our district, but also how we might be having different representations and different levels of opportunity for students based upon their characteristics such as income status, maybe demographics, things like that. The idea here is to have a comprehensive look at how we're doing overall, but also how we're serving our student body in part and in whole. And the idea of this is to give us a starting point where we not only can have some basic ideas of where we're going, but where we're starting from this point forward so that we can continue to track our impact, not only on broad achievement, but on student possibilities and opportunities and outcomes. Okay. So the first part is how we're doing on the state tests. We have historically created our own graphs. This year we've have graphs that mirror very closely what the state provides as information so that we're more closely aligned with how the state is providing this information to families in the community, but also how they are presenting it to us for the ESSA plan that they use to guide or gauge our work. This is last year's performance on the state achievement test called the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. It is the updated part test of old. It is given to students in grades 3 through 8, and it is in two broad areas: English language arts, reading, literacy, if you will, and math. Math is presented first, and it looks at how our district is performing relative to the state. The green, light, and dark portions are the percent of our students who have met the test very high proficiency standards. So you can see in math, we have about 40 students, or 40% of our students who met these standards, and in ELA, 42. Okay, 44 and 42, my mistake. What is of note here is that you can see that the largest area for improvement is that yellow area right simply below the green, those kids who are on the cusp of meeting standards, right? So those are students who have not quite hit the state proficiency standard but are close. It's a quite significant group, which means that we have a real opportunity here to move those students up one short level. The other piece is that we're doing and have historically done better than the state overall. We've done that historically on PARC, and we continue to do that on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. Now, the Assessment of Readiness is very similar. It contains the same items as the PARC test does, but it presents those to students in different configurations. So there is a small difference. It's not considered substantial, but it's enough where the state has separated these results from those on the PARC exam. It feels that they're not apples to apples. So they have looked at our progress from year to year in a different way. In the past, you would see multiple years of PARC results to see are we trending up or trending down, but the state has realized that that's not a legitimate way of looking at growth. It's not sensitive enough for one, but also because the tests have changed slightly, it misrepresents what growth we might actually be having or not having. So instead, they have provided this different metric called a growth percentile. And what a growth percentile is a student's change from 1 year, the year before, to last year, their growth between 2 years, compared to other students that have started at similar levels. So what that means is when we take the Palatine student on average, they're compared to students of comparable levels. So we're not compared to districts that are significantly higher or significantly lower in performance. We're compared generally to students of very similar academic standing, and then we look at how well we grew compared to that group. 50 is exactly average. We exceeded 50% of students, 50% of students exceeded us, and as you go above 50%, our growth is higher, and as you go below 50%, our growth is lower. You can see in math and reading that we are exactly average. It means that we are having the typical level of impact. Students are generally making growth as you would expect. If you were to think about this as physical height and physical growth, you would say, hey, my child is growing about as much as others in their grade level, about as much as others for their age. It's nothing to say is exceptional in terms of difference. It's desirable, okay? Ideally, we will see increases in these year to year, but 50 is a very healthy number to have. The state will always be 50 because that's the overall average, and we're, of course, compared to the overall average. What is new in the ESSA framework just this year is the inclusion of science results. Science is not looked at in terms of year-to-year growth, but just simple proficiency. We give the state science test, the Illinois Illinois Science Assessment, to students in grades 5 and 8. So only those two grades count for us. We had 61% of our students meeting their proficiency targets there, compared to just under 50% across the state. If we look at our results over the last 3 years, we started at 61, had a small decline of 58, not significant, and are at 61 again. What this means is there's a high degree of stability and neither a trend increasing or decreasing, right? That's fairly typical across the state. Obviously, the desirable one is regular increases, but this is not something to be concerned about. Stability tends to be a fairly desirable state. Many schools or districts will see somewhat of a decline, but most remain stable like we have. So this is also a fairly typical result, and that's consistent with what we just saw in terms of the state achievement test in literacy and in math, right? So overall, what we generally have is a series of results that are higher than the state with a fairly stable trend of consistent performance. Now, other areas that we're not quite sure from the state how to fully interpret, but thought was important to include are English language learner progress to proficiency, right? So the state looks at English language learners and says an important outcome for those students is that they reach or attain English proficiency during their school career. That's highly related to work skills, it's highly related to academic achievement, right? And it's something that we provide mandated services to try and improve outcomes in that area as well. So what they do is for each student in grade 1 and above who is an English language learner, they look at where they first started on the access test, which is a measure of English language proficiency, and they create a 5-year horizon for that student. Each of those 5 years then is given a minimal growth target that they need to meet, right? So they step a series of targets for the student to meet so that they attain English proficiency in at most 5 years. And then they look to see how many of those students in our district actually met the year-to-year growth target. We had 69% of our students meet that growth target. Now, if you were to ask me, what does that mean in terms of comparison to other districts, I would tell you very happily that I don't know. They haven't published that data. We don't know if this is typical or atypical. But we do know it's a very important outcome for a pretty significant portion of our student body. And so we include this here until we have more information in fear of questions. But no, really, until we have more information, because we feel that it's important as we move forward and maintain our focus on the strategic plan to give you year on year on year updates as we talk about our impact on this very large and important part of our student body, right? 69% gives us about 70% of the total ESSA points that are available, which is relatively high when you look at the total number of points. But again, I don't know if that's typical or atypical for districts across the board. It's something that ideally the state will give us interpretive information about in the future, and we can add that to this. But again, we thought it was important because we wanted you to have something to look at year upon year to say, hey, why is it still 69% in next year? Or great, it went up. Also, students are looked at in two other ways for their participation in the climate survey. This is the way the state does this, is looking at the number of schools that have met at least 50%. We had 95% of our schools meet that threshold. The one threshold is our therapeutic day school, where many of our students aren't necessarily capable of fully taking this survey. All right, so that's not unexpected, but it's a very high average, and it exceeds the state overall. And finally, chronic absenteeism, that's our last measure of engagement. This is those students who miss 10% or more of the school year. That's about 18 days. And it's for any reason whatsoever. Vacation that a parent might pull them out for, illness, truancy, issues that are not related to something legitimate. All those are combined together. We're at 11%, and the state overall is at 18. All right? Okay. Now this is new. This is not something we've presented before. We've talked about the achievement gap, but we've taken information from the state's portrayal that specifically relates to differences between groups. And these are the main groups that the state focuses on in terms of providing this information to the community. In each case, what this graph represents is the performance of a group with a significant risk factor compared to a group that is considered low risk or not at risk. So if you look at the graph on the left upper hand corner, it is depicting the difference between, in light green, our low-income students on the bottom and our non-low-income students, those students with some affluency. The difference in performance on the PARCC exam is 37 percentage points, meaning that 37% more kids with affluency passed or hit proficiency marks than those kids that are from a low-income family. And then the darker green represents the state. So if you take a cursory look at the larger quadrants here, the 4 quadrants, you'll notice one thing, that our achievement gap in each instance is larger than the state, right? One way to look at that, you have to look at then the top and bottom lines to interpret that productively, to really say, okay, what is the meaning of that and why is that the case? So the first thing we want to look at is the top line, right? Our low risk groups. Our top line in each of the graphs is higher than the top line for the state, meaning our low risk groups perform better than the low risk groups across the state, right? That's a very positive outcome. We tend to do well in addressing the needs of those students who come to us without those risk factors. If you look at the bottom number now, at the bottom line, and compare that to the state, you see that in general, like low income, we see our black students and we see our IEPs, they are either right at or slightly above those higher risk groups than we see at the state, right? Ideally, we would see that a little bit higher than the state, right? As we've had that impact on our low risk groups, we'd like to see that same impact on our groups with some risk factors. And we see, of a special note, the Hispanic group, which is a fairly large portion of our student body, is actually lower than Hispanic group across the state. the general interpretation of this is we are having a very solid and strong impact on those students, a significant portion of our student body actually, who don't come to us with risk factors or come to us with very few. However, as we start to see risk factors emerge, right, and of course, like our Hispanic group, we know that many of these students have multiple factors. They have economic difficulties, they might have second languages, they might have a higher incidence of disabilities. They all count within that group. We see that our ability or our current impact on them is less than we have on these other students. In the ideal case, we'd be having an equal impact, if not accelerated impact, on these groups. Okay? This is for ELA, and then we see a similar, similar for math. Exactly the same interpretation, but one thing that is important here is that if you were to flip back and forth, you would see that the gap in math is larger than the gap in reading. Right? What that means is, as we look at priorities, right, reading has been something that is a larger priority for the district. For our at-risk students, math is something that appears to be more difficult for them to progress on or for us to have the impact on them. So that's just, as we look at priorities and whatnot, math appears to be, for this segment, something of a special note. This is something that we have additional information on that Dr. Swanland will overview, but we're also setting this up in terms of the gap over time, because even though the state tests have changed, every student takes the same tests, and we're looking at the difference. The difference is constant. So if everybody has an easier task, it means it affects their, they both rise with the tide, but the difference is still constant. A more difficult task, they all drop, but the difference is still relatively constant. So we're able to add information over time on that. And I believe, my portion is done. Dr. Swanland has these portions where we'll be talking about this over time, and then some of our equity information about the opportunity gaps that we're also looking at and consider important in tracking and discussing in terms of our plans and their effect on our students' overall performance. So Dr. Swanland, let me pass this to you and wish you the best of luck.
All right. So this information is an attempt to take a look at this gap over time, because what you just saw was 1 year. And to keep in mind that these are actually different tests. So the tests changed from Park, and also we had it paper pencil, we've had it online. So just don't pay a lot of attention to the actual percentages, because that's relative to the test that was taken. This isn't the exact same test over time. But what we are paying attention to is the difference, meaning that gray area. So the blue line represents the non-risk group, the red line represents the risk group. And you're able to see in the gray how much of a gap we see over time in that area. So right now you're looking at ELA and what this gap has been for these different groups. And basically what we're seeing is that it's not really changed a whole lot. We would like to see the red line go up so that the gray reduces. And then the next one is looking at math. So same idea in that we're trying to see how big is this gap? Has it shrunk over time? In other words, has that red line or the high risk group gone up in terms of their achievement? And with math, you can see that that gap is still there. And like we saw for last year's data, it's been pretty consistent over time, and it's our area of higher need. So when looking at this data overall, with the gaps with the groups, we are able to see that there is work to be done. We will be going over what that looks like in terms of connecting it with our strategic plan and our commitment to students, staff, and results. So kind of acknowledging here that we want this to start to look different, and our commitment to that from that equity perspective here. We also had talked about how multiple data sources are important to look at. So we've been only looking so far at what the state provides, our state assessments. So now we're going to look a little bit at what are our internal assessments, mainly the MAP assessment that we've looked at over years. Is it telling us this similar information? So first, this is our achievement. So just proficiency, 50 is average in math and in reading. And we can see that over time, they're very similar. for our district overall. Again, just like what we saw with the IAR results. So over time, the trend has been relatively equal in both areas for the entire district. And this is growth. So again, that growth percentile, that 50 is average, right? So this is looking at students compared to students who start at the same spot. How much are they growing over time? We want it to be around 50 or higher. So you can see that that growth for the district in ELA and in math has been fairly consistent. Math having a slightly downward trend, but nothing that's like very alarming or different. So when you look at our internal assessments, our MAP test, we're seeing a very similar trend as what we saw on the IAR results. And this is also some of that new information that Tom had mentioned, and this is aligned again with our strategic plan and then our commitment to equitable access to program and services for students. So how you look at these graphs is this first one is about gifted. And the blue bars represent the percent of students in those grade levels within each of those groups. So for example, we have 30% of our students in grades 3 through 6, because that's our the grades are gifted program services, who are low income. And the red represents the percentage of students represented in that program. So for example, 4% of students in the gifted program are of low income status. What we would like is to not be able to tell a difference between the colors. In other words, we'd like it to be proportional. Now, granted, gifted is less than 5% of our student population, but it's still one of the, it's a way to look at our programs, though, to see, are the students representative of the population? So when it's a higher, like Asian, that means that 56% of the students in the gifted program are of Asian ethnicity compared to the population of 20%. All right, so that's gifted, is one of the programs we looked at. Another one is our out-of-level math program. So these are students who are having like that accelerated math, they're in a grade level above. And this is service for grades 2 through 6, so that's why that blue bar might change a little bit between each graphs because of the grade levels we're talking about. And this is the same way of looking at this information in terms of what is the proportion of the district compared to the proportion of students who are accessing that program. Again, it's a very small percentage of the students who are in the out-of-level math, but you can see a similar trend in terms of who are the students based off of characteristics or group that are receiving these programs
And
in
Laura,
those gaps.
I'm making the assumption that a child could be in multiple
Oh,
columns,
absolutely.
correct? So we may
Absolutely.
have Asians that speak a second
Yes,
language.
of course.
That comprise.
Mhm.
Okay.
Same idea. So you could also have a student who's multiple groups in the programs too.
Right.
You can. You could. And one of the things to consider too, which we don't have on here, is that the students who speak a second language, it's possible that they are exited English learners, like that kind of stuff we could go more into. But but you can have students in multiple categories for sure. Another program that we looked at, really curriculum-based, is access to algebra or above in terms of math. So this is junior high only, 7th and 8th grade, and this is the proportion of students who received either algebra or a class that's higher than algebra, like advanced topics, geometry, and during their junior high time. And so here you'll see those areas of proportionality as well. Again, green represents the students who receive those math courses compared to the general population of the students in the junior high. And like the other ones, we would like to see it where we can't tell the difference between the two colors. So here you see some areas where there's less of a difference, but we're still seeing some of the similar patterns as we saw for gifted and out-of-level math, which is more the elementary level programming.
One thing is to note here is this looks slightly different than the other ones you've seen in terms of it's a little bit more proportional. I think it was 2 years ago, we worked with DOI we were part of DOI at the time, to implement a procedure to look at identifying students that might be overlooked by the traditional testing perspective and enter those students in. It was, examining alternate measures such as grades, math characteristics as reported by teachers or whatnot. We were able to select multiple students, double digits, and place them in various classes and have had a pretty high level of success. So anyway, that's a nice foray into what we're hoping to see with the other programs that we presented before.
So now we're looking at office discipline referrals. So these represent the percent of students who've received one or more referral based off of behavior. For example, physical aggression, defiance, things like that. So again, you'd want it proportional. And the red means that it's like a higher percent. So for example, and this is grades K through 8 now, 36% of the students are of low income status, 55% of students who received a referral were of low income status. So this also shows area of work to be done, because we would not want to see a group overrepresented in this area, right? And so you can also see some of the groups who are underrepresented, meaning they're less likely to have received an office discipline referral. For example, in this case, Asian and white. And then the final program that we looked at was students who receive special education services. Similar idea in that we want the kind of grayish green to look similar to the blue in terms of proportion and representation within special education. So you can see some of the groups that may have been more likely to be identified as needing special education services. So overall, in summary, when we look at all of this information that we presented in terms of our achievement and our gaps and our access to programs and then whole child indicators as well, that we're able to see that we're outperforming the state in terms of our content areas as a district. Our growth is strong in both math and ELA, and it kind of meets the state expectations. That our internal assessments show a similar pattern as the state assessments do. Our EL students are showing growth towards that English proficiency, and our students are attending school and participating in the climate. So we have good representation of like student involvement in the climate survey so that we can hear their voice about what they think of school.
So, the areas of strength that are highlighted is the same as we've had year after year, where we look at ourselves from a few steps back. We see a lot of positive things, and as we try and get very close to make sure that that's occurring for all students, we start to see some of the details in a more granular view, and we see some differences. And these are the opportunities that we're really focusing on from this year looking forward. What opportunities do we have to have impacts that we can really push the entire district forward by making sure the entire district is addressed? So some of the things we see is that, this first bullet is really a little bit of a misnomer. It is true that our instruction has impacted all students equally, right? The problem is that some students, because of experience, disadvantage, risk factors, start at a disadvantage. And their impact is equal, so they're not closing the gap towards important outcomes in which might provide them opportunities in later life, right? So what we really want to say is that our instruction is impacting them equally, but the outcomes of those students can be very different. We want to have a unequal impact in some cases. The other part is that we found our representativeness for those desirable programs, out of level, advancement, acceleration. There's a difference in representation where we believe that students in the gifted program, that giftedness is equally distributed, regardless of demographic or economics. But for some reason, our program isn't showing that, right? Our selection process isn't working that way. We're not mentoring our students to get to the point where they can get into that type of program. So we have some work to do on impacting our students and identifying new ways of looking at them and servicing them so that they can be afforded the opportunities to participate in these programs at a level we believe would be equitable and what we'd want to see given our assumptions about ability distribution and things like that. That also is the case for the discipline and IEPs. We don't believe that any group is inherently more disposed to these things. And so it also prompts us to look at how we are setting ourselves up in order to try and create something that's more aligned to the proportionality we see in our larger student body. A lot of these achievement gaps we see is related in part to the opportunity gap in that, we are having a differential impact. And so really what this tells us is that as we take a very close look, we have a lot of very positive impacts on a lot of our students, but we have a lot of work to do still for portions of our student body that are very important, that come to us sometimes less prepared or with a little bit of higher risk to take advantage of the really good instruction that's being provided that many students are able to grab hold of.
So this is then connecting to what now, given the information you've seen, what initiatives and practices are we being committed to as a district in order to have these outcomes look better? And it comes down to, again, that commitment to equity and addressing the gaps. And this is done through, one of the first ways is our commitment to students. So we've highlighted some of the areas here that show the work that we are doing and work that we're continuing to do to make stronger so that we're able to have that impact, that positive impact for our students. First is our use of the instructional framework, developing, using it in order to guide teaching and improvement in that area. Another is that multi-tiered systems of support structure, or MTSS, so that we have the needs of all students addressed through those different tiers, meaning that we're able to meet the new students' needs where they're at in order to address the needs of everyone. We're expanding our social and emotional initiatives. This is a way to ensure that all students feel safe, that they are connected, that they have relationships. And this is through multiple avenues in terms of prevention activities, like through our PBIS systems, to intervention, addressing behavioral and mental health, community partnerships, and working with agencies in those areas. And then the restorative practices. Again, this is another way to really help ensure that our students are connected to the school community. Another one is our rigorous selection and evaluation system to identify and adapt new instructional materials. Again, making sure that these are aligned to the needs of our students. And then we've heard a lot about our culture and linguistically responsive teaching, or CLR, in the work with Dr. Howley, because this helps our staff understand how to meet the needs of our students, to look through cultural lens and have it so that environment really is able to address equity across the school.
The second part is our commitment to staff, and so it's talking about how we've developed and started to implement new professional development to prepare our teachers to address the needs of our students in different ways. We've also had a main focus on adopting and supporting the Fauna Percentile classroom, a major literacy initiative, which you guys have heard a couple times. And it's something that is undergoing a very systematic and supported rollout. And so far, the feedback on that has been really positive. We're hoping that that will be something that allows our teachers to be very responsive and flexible within a literacy environment for our students. We have also started to rework our systems so that those people at the ground level, our staff, have greater avenues and voice in our improvement efforts. So instead of really looking at this as a school level effort, we look at this as a staff level effort. And part of that is making sure that the staff have opportunities to influence it at a level that is appropriate and, I guess, enabling, empowering, if you will, so that they feel part of the solution versus something handed to them. And finally, we've really started to work in a way through human resources in the other departments about how we might better engage, prepare, retain our staff. There's been a couple discussions about how we partner with universities to provide people with cohort training that wouldn't be available to them otherwise, so that they have something that's very special in District 15 that other districts wouldn't provide them, that also is providing them with specialized skills in a way where students can be impacted in a much higher level. And finally, our commitment to results. This is the first renewed presentation we have that we hope will provide the context for future updates in terms of really where are we headed, and to provide you with a foundation to ask questions about why does it look this way, why are we not going up, or what did you do that did lead this to go up. The other part, of course, is making sure that we focus on not just the average and larger outcomes of the district, but are we having that impact that we want across all of the groups in our student body in a way that we feel is aligned with our goals and is impactful towards making sure all students have opportunities as they leave District 15. And finally, we want to make sure that we can really continue to go beyond the achievement of students, but also look at their opportunities. Our students, regardless of who they are, how they enter our district, do they have an equal chance to participate in the many great things that we provide students? And also, do they have an equal chance of avoiding some of those things that might thwart some of the outcomes we want for them? An important piece of this, I know I had this nightmare that Frank was going to ask me all these questions. I want answers. I want answers. And rightly so. It really, I actually did have that. But the importance of what we've talked about administratively is, Dr. Hines has talked to us administratively about having regular updates. So you had an second language update. There'll be an update, I think, in math next month, right? And we're going to be doing a social emotional update. And the idea is that this report this year provides a jumping off point for each of these updates. We feel that this work is important enough to not try and crush into a 20-minute update for you. We feel that you should have the results, be able to ask your questions about the results themselves, but in terms of the answers, that Frank's going to ask for. But, in terms of like the questions around, okay, so what changes have we made in light of this information? What are we doing in light of this information? We're hoping that this provides a reference point to begin each of those presentations so people can say, well, in the math area, here's what the results are and what we're hoping to address, and here are the changes we made this year to try and produce that. And of course, as we go through our update next year, we'll see if we're on the right track or if the next update will provide further changes. So, we have math in February. There'll be an SEL, social emotional update in March, and then we'll continue on with the schedule as appropriate. But just so you know the details, we thought it would be more important to give you an idea of this will be included in the month-to-month updates that we provide on our plan in the content areas versus just at the end of this presentation as a addition to all the data you've seen. So with that, what questions are on your minds?
So is this data based off of the end of last year, or?
It's last year's information.
I was in this last semester.
And ideally, Frank, what we would be providing the board with is probably something in September, at latest October, so that front loads the rest of the reports to the board over the course of the year. This year was just later, given our work on the strategic plan and some of the other updates that we wanted to provide.
So Laura, the data that you presented was based on map testing. The gap with the gray in the middle.
No, that was state testing. That was
Okay.
state. It's just that the first few years was Park, and then our own administration of Park looked a little different as it went to computer-based, and then the last year was IAR.
So it's all based on state
So this was
results.
state.
Nothing is based on our own internal map testing. Okay.
But you did look at the map numbers to say that our scores they're creating a similar picture.
It's a-
Yeah.
Yeah.
We include the map test here
Yeah,
That's
But we
okay.
just didn't
That's
break
what
it
you're
down.
asking about, yeah.
I gotcha.
in the same way.
For the gifted program, and this is a question that I had the luxury to ask you yesterday when we had our equity committee meeting. Can you walk through our current selection process for gifted, and what that looks like?
So we have 2 entry points into the gifted program currently, grades 2 and 4. Those have been historic entry points. Once a student enters into the program in grade 3, they continue through grade 6, and then in the junior high, their needs are addressed through the different academic tracks, whether it be accelerated reading or whether it be algebra or whatnot, those types of things. The process for selecting students is that every second grade student is screened, and we screen in 2 ways. So they're screened academically with our MAP test, and we provide 2 versions of the MAP test for our students, one in English with accommodations, and the other in Spanish if the student is a native Spanish speaker and they have not yet met English proficiency. We do that to try and nullify any language impact. The students are compared to a national percentile. So the student's MAP test is what's called a norm reference test, and it means the results are interpreted by looking at how well that student did compared to others in the same grade across the nation. They have to meet a certain threshold, the 90th percentile in reading and math, nationally in order to be entered into the second assessment bucket, which is looking at their cognitive skills in 3 domains: nonverbal reasoning, verbal reasoning, and quantitative skills. Those results are all combined to produce an overall score of which a threshold is reached, and the student is then entered into the program unless there is significant objection about how the test results don't represent the student's skills overall or whatnot. Parent participation is asked for along the way in terms of 2 points where each parent is allowed to engage the district if the particular test scores do not appear to represent their student's history of test performance or their current performance. They have an appeal process, we have a review, and can offer retests or other decisions, and that also goes for the cognitive assessment. Part of this in our assessment process, we've looked at it over the last couple of years. Part of this assessment process is probably part of the reason we see what we see in front of us in terms of the underrepresentation of certain groups, right? The reason why, of course, is that one of the logics behind the use of a norm reference test is that it allows you to compare how well you're doing relative to others that are similar to you. However, we know that if you look at students across the nation, a student who comes from a Hispanic low-income family is probably not well represented in the national norm group of that test. And as a result, we're assuming that these 2 children have had similar experiences, similar opportunities, and thus would have similar scores through that comparison process. But in reality, the different opportunities probably allow us to to not see the top of the talent group for that group because we're comparing them to very different students. There are ways to get around that, but the other part also is our model is a self-contained only model. And what that really means is that even though you might be at the top of your talent group, but because of your experiences, you might not need to leave your school to be enriched, but you still should be enriched. Right now, our current program is only one avenue. So it means we need to look at both how we are identifying students, and there are ways that we have researched that we can implement to do that, but then we also have to look at the way our service setup is constructed so that we can actually then implement the appropriate services for those students, which would mean some reconfiguration of the program, or, like Dr. Hines has talked about, if those needs exceed that, it might have to be a new staffing configuration. And in fact, staffing configurations are implied in a lot of these disproportionality results. So did that
Yeah,
get
thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Tom, Laura, I noticed that in your presentation, you said 4 times, we have work to do, and I was just sort of curious about that. When you present the information, particularly about the achievement gaps, was any of that data surprising to you that, for the past 4 years or so, that we really haven't made a dent in our students that were of highest risk? I mean, as you were, is it the fact that we historically haven't been trending it or monitoring it, or we just haven't been intervening for these kids, either one or all?
I think, the way we've really looked at our results over the last multiple years is in the aggregate. So it's the beginning of our report here where it's very positive. And as we really started to look at ourselves through a new lens of equity, we've really begun to focus on things that we are not doing as well as we would like to. So in terms of, is this surprising for me? No, the achievement gap is actually entrenched in all districts across the nation. It's been something that has proven elusive in terms of addressing in a way where it is closed, except for in very rare circumstances that are difficult to replicate. I think the important point for today is a very honest and transparent display of this, a commitment to the regular revisitation of it, and the conscious connection of each person's department's work and update to the board around how it is aligned to the results we're talking about today. So I guess what I would say is, that we've done many things over the years, like, for example, the implementation of culturally and linguistically responsive teaching. Prior to looking at these results today, we've been doing many things. We've updated our math program, we have implemented literacy intervention and revised that. We're engaging in the revision of the larger MTSS process. I guess I don't want to convey that we have been inactive or even maybe not knowledgeable of these things. We have been working on it. I think what is different now is just the more transparent display of it and the connection of our work to it. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes.
4 times, you were keeping track?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Well, I think, as Laura and I have prepared for these, presentations over the years, this has been one of our more exciting times working together and collaborating on this, because I think it really, again, is a renewed perspective. It is something that we see as not one report to the board that is done, and then the rest of the work that is presented to you is disconnected from. And we see this really as, Dr. Hines, Dr. Kowalczyk, and others who have brought in new leadership and new perspective. It's really trying to connect various things, so we're very intentional in making sure that the plan drives our work, the results are centered, and then our updates are connected to both. So we're hoping that you'll see this as a very positive move forward. And again, I think the question that you asked me is a very important question to keep in mind and repeat each month as we go through the content, discussions around, okay, what is math and what are the changes that are occurring? Okay, so tell me about the history, because we've seen this gap. How does it fit? I think that's a very honest and good conversation to have at each of the content updates as we move forward in the board meetings this year.
Are we setting any district-wide goals around making movement to close the gap? Lori?
I don't think we've set a specific number, but I think we very much believe that, to Tom's point, how focused we are on the strategic plan, like everything we did from adding the equity inclusivity bullet under the values to the 4 commitments to the work that's behind the commitments. We're very focused on making sure that all students really means all, and that we're monitoring their progress and we're helping all students continue to grow. The whole plan is built on the notion of continuously improving the district, and part of that is improving the experience and the outcomes for students. So I don't know that we've set like a number target. We are working on a scorecard where we'll have this information that we've shown you, graphically.
Yeah.
We'll put it in number form, and then we'll start to track year over year from kind of this point forward how we're doing.
To Lori.
I also
Yeah.
feel like it's the beginning of figuring out a good way to measure.
Yes.
Because in the 2.5, 3 years that we've been sitting here, there's been a lot of conversation on how do you measure this? How do you have real measurements that then you can track results and impact of new curricular additions and things of that sort, so that we know that we're really making an impact.
To Dr. Hyde's point, so we haven't, as a district, set official goals, I guess, but on the scorecard, so we have a balanced scorecard. We talked about that. I think in December you saw a little preview of it. We had the scorecard reflects each of the 4 major areas: the commitment to students, staff, facilities, and results. In the results section, we have specific targets that we have set internally for the achievement gap and disproportionate discipline. I wouldn't know that if we'd call it a district goal, but we would say that we have set targets that we will use as part of our updates. Are we on target or off target over the course of years? It's really just meant to be a benchmark where we could say, ooh, this alerts us to needing to make a change, or we feel like we're on track, and so therefore we want to just continue to monitor what we're doing, but we don't need to re-engage in revision. So that is part of our larger planning system, and part of the reason we wanted to move towards a scorecard approach as part of our management, where we could look to not only annually update you, but also have some targets that tell us whether or not we are on an approximate road to success early on.
I would just say that having a formal emphasis of these equity, the equity concern, having that as a formal emphasis on every single thing, hopefully, will bring by results. I mean, I think it's very sobering to see that that chart of the 5 or 6 years in a row where this hasn't changed a bit, and the community is really relying on the administration and all of us working together to really make a dent in that. It's something that is so crucial. It's just when you think about how different is life in District 15 than other districts that we hear about, the unfortunate districts. Are the unfortunate districts here? This is the unfortunate district. And that's very sobering to me. And so I'm very happy that, we met yesterday, obviously, but that's going to be an emphasis on each program that we're putting out there, and that we really see that as an emergency.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it was also really helpful when we were talking about how this equity piece threads through so much of our work outside of academics, and we were talking about the teacher representation gap in terms of our staff reflecting our student body as well. And the team highlighted a program, and I'm just curious if we can just talk about that for a second. That's one of the ways that we're thinking about increasing the diversity of our staff and leveraging that for equity. Can we just highlight that really quick?
Harper Promise.
Yep.
It's the Harper Promise.
This is really nice.
It just was a positive
Oh, that's okay.
thing that came out of yesterday.
It's the Educator Prep Program, which is through District 214, where they encourage the students, particularly the Latino students, to pursue education careers and to start those careers and the preparation for them while they're still in high school. They're offering them the opportunity to observe in classrooms, do a little bit of student teaching, and really get a feel for what the education careers really entail. So what we are doing to make sure that those students are on track is making sure that our students know the requirements for Harper Promise and that they're on track as much as possible with the requirements both academically and with regard to the volunteer hours that are required. So we have our Harper Promise Junior program at all of our junior highs where the students start to practice everything that's going to be required with regard to keeping their academics up and the requirement of some minimal community service similar to what's going to be expected of them when they go to high school and apply to be part of Harper Promise. The other thing that we have done is made sure that Harper is represented at all of our junior high graduations, because a lot of our parents aren't aware of this opportunity that is right in front of them for 2 full years of fully paid college tuition. So we provide information in both English and Spanish, as well as have a representative at all of our junior highs at graduation. The important combination of the Ed Prep program and the Harper Promise is kids who are in the Ed Prep program who happen to be Latino may not have the resources necessary to pay for college. So having those 2 years paid for, knowing upfront what the requirements are, and knowing that they have to apply by December of their freshman year or they're cut out of the deal, is a really important partnership that we have between District 15, Harper, and District 214. So it's pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I get a pen?
Maybe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a motion for the reading and acceptance of minutes, please?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the following meetings of the Board of Ed, December 11, 2019, Special Board of Education meeting and executive session.
Second,
Second.
discussion? Roll call?
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smoka,
Aye.
Shukai,
Aye.
Vaughn.
Aye.
Motion carries. Board committee reports. The Ed Red organization, Frank?
Okay, so the legislature is not in session right now, but there's a few things going on. The recent newspaper reports about timeouts and restraint on children has spawned two identical bills, both houses, and the only concern we have, Fed Red has with regards to the bills is that they're kind of vague right now. There's a lot of details that are not fully defined, and the way they're defining things is not really clear. So ISB has got some clarification on a lot of things, so we're hoping that they will work out those details and flesh them out a little bit before they go and have the final text of the bills for voting on. So, but I mean, there's plenty of time on that, so that's just one thing going on. Other thing that's kind of interesting would be the taxpayer, or I should say the property tax relief force. They met and they came with a couple suggestions, even though the final report's not done, even though it was due on the 31st. They're hoping to have that done by the end of this month. A couple of things they suggested try to get property taxes down were consolidating school districts, which is going to apply to us, merging of units of local government, shortening TIFs, which would be interesting, shorten them from like 23 years to 10 years, and then have stricter TIF requirements. So you can't have a TIF district unless it really is blighted. So something like down in the former Motorola campus, which wasn't really blighted, that became a TIF, which was kind of unusual. Well, I should say maybe it was usual, but it just shouldn't have been that way. And then also just last thing they were talking about was reforming property tax assessments. So we'll see if anything really comes out of it. There's some people talking about them not really having a strong goal-oriented process, more of just throwing out ideas that are going to get lost, not acted on. But we'll see how it comes, and hopefully they actually do something with property tax relief. That's about it.
All right. Thanks. Mike, 1-5 Foundation?
1-5 Foundation, thank you for giving my report last month since I was watching via Facebook. 1-5 Foundation is starting their 50/50 5/29 raffle. That starts February 1st, so keep an eye out for communication. I'm sure that you'll be getting something from Morgan shortly. So that will be starting last year. I believe it was the first year that it was done, and it had a very good response. So get signed up early, get your raffle tickets bought.
Perfect, thanks. Finance Committee, Anthony, Linda?
No, thanks.
Equity Committee, Zubair, Sam?
Well, we had a meeting yesterday to look at this presentation. We also discussed a little bit more about how the Equity Committee could help in kind of seeing some of the future presentations and that are going to be done, how the equity piece is incorporated in there to make sure that it's giving the right emphasis to the community in the meetings, and also have kind of oversee a role on those presentations and see how this equity concepts are being implemented in the various presentations.
Great. Is there any discussion with regard to the board policy, the first reading that was in the packet? Was human resources related?
Yes, it is in there because effective January 1, the Illinois Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act went into effect, legalizing marijuana use for individuals 21 years and older. So we knew that we had to update our policy that talks, policy 5:50, that has to do with the drug-free workplace. So the language that we added puts us in line with the CRTA, the new CRTA that went into effect on the 1st. We communicated the information to staff before break. We knew we had a meeting right after break. So it's a first and second read so we can update the policy. Any questions regarding the changes? You saw that it's HLRC weighed in, and they gave these policies to all of their clients, and we accepted everything that they suggested, and wanted to know if you would do the same. Any questions or?
I only had one question. It's not related to the cannabis, but the portion about administering medications to students.
Yep.
And I want to talk specifically about the supply of undesignated epinephrine injectors. Do we have that on all our at each of our schools?
We do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. That's been in place for a number of years, and it's actually been utilized in some cases for both students and adults.
Okay.
There's a lot of regulation in terms of reporting once that occurs, and there's a program now by which some of those are provided to the school because EpiPens are quite expensive.
They're hard to come by now.
Purchase them without
Yep.
insurance.
Very hard to come by.
Yes, those are at all of our schools
Okay.
and in the nurse's office.
And there's always either a nurse or a trained staff member available
All our
to,
schools have at least one school nurse.
okay.
So in this district, does staff use the demo pens to learn, typically like at an institute day, do they learn how to inject if they needed to?
Through the GCN tutorials,
Mhm.
there's a component on that cycle of tutorials and recognizing the sign of anaphylactic shock. That's a component of it, but not a hands-on, everyone
Okay.
being trained with it.
But the GCN is very explicit. It specifies that you do not need to remove any clothing. take
Right
your
into the
cap off,
thighs.
Step by
and you-
step.
It could be clear.
All right.
All right.
Action items, item 9.1, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the January 8th, 2019 personnel report as presented.
Second,
Second.
discussion? Roll call?
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.2, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the resolution to establish a fiscal year and prepare a budget as presented.
Second,
Second.
discussion? Roll call?
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Iannarino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.3, may I have a motion please? Excuse me.
Well, I guess.
Nine
per-
point three.
per-
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the discussion.
per the,
How we're going.
Excuse me.
Direction.
Why don't we discuss first and then we'll go to the motion?
I think what
Should we
Mike
just kinda
said
go around this
before.
way, or?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. I guess my position on this is that if the owners at Park Place are expecting us to expend funds, my position would be to terminate this. So my vote today would be to amend based on that. So in the event that the Park Place owners say, hey, you guys need to start doing some due diligence on this, I would say that we would terminate based on their position. But today I would vote to amend to give us those additional 90 days.
I agree.
I feel comfortable with that.
I feel comfortable with
Do you want to work that into an amended motion?
that. I guess he doesn't really have to
Yeah.
amend the motion, he can just.
No, because I guess.
If there hasn't been any
It's
motion.
yes, and then are
on
you
the
giving
table.
us a time
Motion,
clock
yeah.
to do
Well,
90?
I don't think we need to amend the motion. I think it's that we're going in it with the thought that we're going to ask for a 90-day due diligence period to be extended. If he comes back and says, no, we're not going to do that for you, it's being terminated on the owner's position, not on our position.
Right.
I guess that would be,
So it would be the second one there.
yeah,
I make a motion.
Make a motion.
yeah.
Motion to
You read it?
Do you need to put, I can say, I have it here. Do you think you need to put in this motion to extend and as long as the financial component doesn't begin to?
Yeah, that's.
Subject to the expansion of
Yes,
funds.
because that's where I think it needs to be subtly adjusted.
And then since you made that adjustment, I'll just make it while you're at it.
It's all you, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Make a motion to enter into an amendment to the real estate purchase agreement for the Park Place property dated June 25th, 2019, to extend the due diligence period for at least an additional 90 days, subject to the expansion of district funds, subject to the review and approval of the board's legal counsel, and authorize the superintendent and board president to sign such amendment.
Second.
Discussion.
command.
So contingent upon no additional funding.
Unless at some point between now and those 90 days, we come back and say, yes, let's move forward on it.
All right. Roll call?
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.4, motion please.
I make a motion to enter into a master agreement with Nicholas and Associates, Inc. of Mount Prospect, Illinois, as construction management for Community Consolidated School District 15. Fees for all future projects will be based on the attached master agreement. I further make a motion to approve the project authorization exhibit for the summer of 2020 construction projects, including secure vestibules and Willow Bend HVAC upgrades, and the project authorization exhibit for cost estimating.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
So again, just to reiterate, this, although we're approving the master agreement and the two authorizations, any subsequent projects, although the master agreement applies to those, we don't have to approve them, we'll be getting them one by one.
Right, so the project authorization sheets, we will bring those to the, so once we present, every fall, we present, proposed projects to the board. We will then prepare a project authorization sheet based upon the master agreement and ask the board to approve the project authorization sheet every year. What it saves us is having to negotiate that fee, that construction management fee every single year. The fee schedule is established, but every year we will ask the board to approve the specific projects that we want Nicholas and Associates to serve as CM.
Understood, okay.
And this replaces a general contractor.
Correct.
Right, so we will bid everything going forward out as a CM project and not a GC. Unless administration comes to you and says it's a small parking lot, for example, we would not use a CM. We would just handle that in-house.
Okay.
So there still are some projects that we will do, but if it's small enough and it's a scope we think we can handle, like a parking lot again, we would not use CM.
So, but does that mean that every single other project, aside from the small ones that we're doing, that every single one would have to go through Nicholas and Associates?
Depending on, our recommendation would be dependent upon
The scope.
Okay.
the size of the scope and the size of the project. But I wouldn't say every single one, it would be dependent upon the scope.
Okay.
Roll call?
Smolka,
Aye.
Shukai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Cunt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar? May I have a motion? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a question. Could we add some additional context about the student fee recommendation fees?
Do we need to pull that out? We need to pull that out, I think, to have discussion on it.
Oh,
So we have to pull that out first. Robert's rules.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay.
so a motion to remove the fee structure from the, so which
Yeah, so
number
we'll,
is it?
we'll just make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the removal of 10.5, the 2020-21 student fee recommendation.
Second?
Second.
All right, roll call?
Shukai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Iannarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Cunt,
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Do we need a motion to discuss or just?
No, I think we
discuss?
pulled it out, so I think we can discuss it. We'll have to make a motion to approve that.
put it back on.
Yeah,
Right.
that particular
Right.
item.
Approve it
By itself.
individually.
Correct.
Yep.
So your
Oh, you,
question
Sam.
was-
Let's hear it.
Sam.
No, I just was hoping to get a little bit more context about the student fee changes, just highlighting publicly what was changed, and then specifically a little bit about the fees charged for lunch and breakfast, and it looks like that's gonna be brought to the board as a future meeting, but just wanted some additional context about that.
Mike, was there nothing changed on that?
Yeah, we've made no recommendations for the student fee changes. We haven't changed.
Changed them in years.
Right,
And
Yeah.
they were the same.
It's been a while.
Probably since Corey and I have been here together for 9 years, we have not made any recommended changes to that. I should sit down.
Yes, you should.
And there's certain guidelines we have to follow on student lunch fees that's generated by the Illinois State Board of Education. And we don't get that until April or May. So we've always in the past not brought those until, usually it's the June board meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And if we ever wanted to look at the fee structure, we could either do that through maybe the finance committee of the board, or it's something that we could bring to the board at a future time for discussion. Because although you try to keep your fees down, typically every so often, you might need to adjust those fees. So is that something you want us to put on a future agenda, or is the board feeling fine with where we are with the fees?
I think since there weren't any significant shifts, I feel comfortable
Okay.
as is.
Leave them as is.
Yeah,
Okay. So then do I need to make a motion?
Yeah, and we'll make a motion for item 10.5.
Awesome. I make a motion to approve item 10.5 on the consent calendar, the 2020-2021 student fee recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, or any discussion, because it's no longer. Roll call.
Long,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Enarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye. Motion carries. 11 correspondence, Dr. Hines?
FOIA, okay, is that FOIA?
Yes. FOIAs or impact fees, but there were no impact fees that were in the packet.
So we received 2 FOIAs that were included. Did you have questions about them?
You know, I didn't see our responses. You guys did fine.
You just put bullets,
Our
as to when
responses
the
are
responses
behind
were
the
received,
third
and then,
attachment.
do you have these copies, Frank? I have them in the paper copies, which,
Cause yeah, the responses were like, there's an email attachment, but I didn't see the email attachment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
because we have them The entire here. response itself
Right.
is emailed to the board members the day it goes out.
Oh, okay, so the email attachment's
Right,
not
this is
in.
just
have
the
them.
cover letter. Right.
Got it, okay.
Okay,
Is that it?
that's it.
All right. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Second.
The press was in there, right?
Yes.